The 9th century was a time of chaos and bloodshed in England. Viking raiders, fierce warriors from Scandinavia, were striking fear into the hearts of the Anglo-Saxons. They sailed across the North Sea in their longships, plundering monasteries, burning villages, and slaughtering anyone who stood in their way. No kingdom was safe. Northumbria, East Anglia, and Mercia all suffered under the relentless attacks. But one kingdom would rise to become the last line of defense against the Norse invaders, Wessex. Before Alfred the Great famously defended England against the Vikings, his father Æthelwulf of Wessex laid the groundwork for resistance. Though often overshadowed by his legendary son, Æthelwulf played a crucial role in keeping Wessex strong. He fought decisive battles, made key political alliances, and even took a historic journey to Rome that would shape the future of his dynasty. Æthelwulf was born in the early 9th century, the son of King Egbert of Wessex. His father was no ordinary king. Egbert had spent years in exile after losing his claim to the throne, only to return and conquer Wessex, making it one of the most powerful Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. By the time Æthelwulf was a young man, his father had expanded Wessex's influence and even defeated the powerful kingdom of Mercia, securing dominance over southern England. As the son of a warrior king, Æthelwulf was raised in a world of warfare, diplomacy, and royal politics. He likely trained as a warrior from a young age, learning to fight and lead armies. He was also deeply religious, which would later influence many of his decisions as king. By the late 820s, as Egbert worked to strengthen his rule, he appointed Æthelwulf as sub-king of Kent, a region that also included Sussex, Surrey, and Essex. This move ensured that Wessex had direct control over southeastern England while also preparing Æthelwulf for kingship. In 839, King Egbert died, and Æthelwulf inherited the throne of Wessex. But he wasn't just ruling over one kingdom, he also controlled Kent, Sussex, and Essex, meaning he was responsible for a vast territory stretching from the English Channel to the heart of England. Unlike his father, Æthelwulf did not seek further conquests. Instead, he focused on securing his kingdom against the growing Viking threat. During the early years of his reign, Viking raids were becoming more frequent and more devastating. Coastal towns and monasteries were easy targets for Norse raiders, and the Anglo-Saxons had few defenses against their hit-and-run tactics. Realizing the importance of alliances, Æthelwulf worked to maintain good relations with Mercia and Northumbria, the other major Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. At one point, he even married Osber, a noblewoman of high status, with whom he had several children, including the future king Alfred the Great. Despite the looming Viking threat, Æthelwulf also showed a deep concern for religion and the well-being of his people. He donated generously to churches and monasteries, believing that divine favor would protect his kingdom. However, Æthelwulf's greatest test was yet to come. The Vikings were no longer content with small raids. They were preparing for full-scale invasions, and Wessex would soon be their primary target. Æthelwulf's reign was marked by increasing Viking aggression. In the early years of his rule, the Norsemen primarily conducted small-scale raids, striking coastal settlements, looting monasteries, and then quickly disappearing back into the sea. But as the 840s progressed, these attacks became more frequent, more coordinated, and far more devastating. The Vikings were no longer just raiders, they were invaders. By the mid-9th century, England was under siege. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records numerous Viking raids across the kingdom, with Wessex being a prime target. The situation became so dire that in 843, Æthelwulf suffered a major defeat at Carhampton against a Viking force. This loss showed that the Norsemen were becoming a real threat to Wessex stability. The neighboring kingdom of Mercia, once a dominant power in England, was also struggling to defend itself. This left Wessex as the only remaining stronghold of resistance in southern England. If Æthelwulf failed, there would be little to stop the Vikings from overrunning the entire region. The defining moment of Æthelwulf's military career came in 851, when the largest Viking force ever seen in England up to that point landed on the shores of southern England. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a massive fleet of 350 Viking ships sailed up the Thames, sacking Canterbury and London and dealing a crushing defeat to the Mercians. The Vikings then turned south, setting their sights on Wessex. This was a critical moment. If Wessex fell, England's last line of defense against the Norse invaders would be gone. But Æthelwulf was ready. Gathering his forces, he met the Viking army at Aclea. What followed was one of the most significant battles of the 9th century. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle describes it as a great slaughter, where thousands of Vikings were killed and their invasion force shattered. Æthelwulf's victory at Aclea was so decisive that it temporarily halted large-scale Viking invasions in Wessex for several years. But despite this great victory, Æthelwulf knew that the Viking threat was far from over. The Norsemen would return stronger than ever, and Wessex would need to be prepared. After his great victory against the Vikings, Æthelwulf made a surprising decision, a journey that would take him far from the battlefields of England and deep into the heart of Christian Europe. In 855, Æthelwulf left his kingdom and embarked on a pilgrimage to Rome, bringing with him his youngest son, Alfred, the future Alfred the Great. Taking his youngest son Alfred along may have been a way to prepare him for future kingship. By exposing him to the grandeur of Rome and the workings of European politics, Æthelwulf was shaping Alfred into a future leader. Upon arriving in Rome, Æthelwulf was received with great honor by Pope Leo IV. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records that he made generous donations to the church, funded the restoration of Saxon schools in Rome, and even arranged for a lavish feast to be held for the Roman poor. In return, the Pope personally anointed young Alfred, marking him as a future leader, a moment that may have shaped Alfred's later vision of himself as a divinely chosen ruler. However, while Æthelwulf was away, trouble was brewing back home. Many of the nobles in Wessex were unhappy with his decision to leave the kingdom, believing he had abandoned his duties. Taking advantage of this unrest, his eldest son Æthelbald seized the throne in Wessex. When Æthelwulf returned to England in 856, he found himself locked in a power struggle. Instead of plunging Wessex into civil war, Æthelwulf made a surprising compromise. He agreed to share power with Æthelbald, ruling over Kent, Essex, Surrey, and Sussex while Æthelbald retained control of Wessex. On his way back from Rome, Æthelwulf made another strategic move. He married Judith, the daughter of Charles the Bald, the king of the Franks. This was a highly significant marriage because Judith was of Carolingian blood, directly descended from Charlemagne. By marrying her, Æthelwulf linked Wessex to one of the most powerful royal families in Europe. Despite this political setback, Æthelwulf continued to rule with determination, focusing on defending his lands from Viking attacks and maintaining stability. However, his time on the throne was coming to an end. In 858, just 2 years after returning to England, Æthelwulf died. The exact cause of his death is unknown, but given that he had already been forced into a power-sharing agreement, it is likely that he was either old or in poor health.